Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And want to start off this episode, in which we'll be focusing on the international free agent signing period, by thanking, as always, the Worldwide Scouting Department, also known as our loyal viewers and commenters, who have given us a lot of good thoughts on what we should consider doing with the IAFA class this year. If you're a regular viewer of the channel and a member of the Worldwide Scouting Department, or a new viewer of the channel and for whatever reason you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, would sincerely appreciate it if you do that, and always appreciate a thumbs up on the videos, and more than anything appreciate the interaction we do have with the Worldwide Scouting Department in the comment section of all of these videos as we continue on our quest in Oakland. And after winning 2 consecutive World Series championships the last couple seasons, the goal is to set this team up for a three-peat in 2044. The decisions we're going to be focusing on over the short term are not really going to help us anytime soon, as we're looking at a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds. Most of the feedback from the Worldwide Scouting Department centered on position players, and I do tend to agree with that. I think Ramiro Rivera and Jesus Garza, who are both looking for a little less than $1 million right now, are players that I would consider supplementing in with one big-time player if we're fortunate enough to get a big-time player signed with us. Juan de la Cueva, who is certainly the gem of this IAFA class, likely not somebody that we're going to go for, given the low leadership, loyalty, and work ethic, and the fact that his asking price of $3.2 million is as high as any player in this pool. And we think that among some of the position players, there are definitely cleaner prospects than De La Cueva. And when we turn our attention to that interesting crop of position players, it turns out that the 4 players who received the most endorsement and attention from the Worldwide Scouting Department are actually the 4 players who, at the end of the last episode, I considered the top 4 in my mind as well. So certainly don't want confirmation bias to shape my decision making, but it definitely was good to see that the Worldwide Scouting Department overall likes the same 4 guys that I do. Of those 4 players, there definitely was a little bit of stratification, 2 of whom who received less attention, and then 2 of whom who were very strongly endorsed by more people. I think probably the 4th choice overall was the shortstop Domingo Rivera, 16-year-old out of the Dominican. He was number 1 on Kevin McDowell's list and number 3 on Peter Hooper's list. Definitely a lot to like about Bucket Romero. Love the range in the arm combination and a lot of versatility in his ratings, where he could basically play any position on the field except for catcher. Best personality of anyone out there, with high leadership, loyalty, adaptability, and intelligence, or more accurately, the best personality of any of the top prospects. And a bat that we think can be above average in everything, with very good gap power, potentially outstanding home run power, and a very good eye. Doesn't have the best speed in the world, not a great bunter, but still a very interesting prospect to consider. The other guy who probably, if we were to do this in terms of weighted average votes, likely finished 3rd in the Worldwide Scouting Department's voting, just ahead of Rivera, was the center fielder Alfredo Galarza, another guy that I like. He was Tyler M's first choice, Coach 1549 had him number 2, and both Kevin McDowell and Peter Hooper, who provided pretty detailed lists this time around, had Galarza, also known as the Sonic Kid, ranked 4th. For those of you who watched our Buffalo Wings series, when you look at Galarza's durability and potentially excellent in contact and gap power with really good speed, there are definitely some Deshaun Seifu vibes there. Potentially good power and good eye as well, like the high work ethic, and think he can be pretty effective on the base paths. So the left-handed hitting outfielder is another guy that I really like. Rivera at $2.8 million and Galarza at $3 million are both pretty highly priced. But as good as both of those prospects are, and as much as I like both of them, do have to acknowledge that there were 2 other players that were even more highly endorsed by the worldwide scouting department. And although both of these players were heavily endorsed, there is a clear number 1 and a clear number 2. The number 2 is the shortstop Nelson Ramirez, top choice of Scott B., YME943, and Peter Hooper. Sean Gratton had him number 2. Kevin McDowell had him number 3. So a lot of endorsements of Governor Ramirez, and a lot of things to like. Potentially incredible contact and home run power combination with 80 and 75 in those categories if he completely develops. And we also think his gap power and his eye could both be above average. Really like the infield range already for a 16-year-old, soon to be 17-year-old to be fair. Has some work to do as far as not booting the balls when he does get his glove on them, but that could improve with time. Really like the high leadership and work ethic combination. Don't love the low loyalty. He's an outstanding bunter with good speed and solid base running instincts. So really, outside of hopefully improving the glove a bit, not a lot of holes in Governor Ramirez's name, his game. You can see those of you who have been following me over the last couple of weeks, I still have this pneumonia vid or whatever I've been dealing with for about 3 weeks. So apologies that my voice comes and goes and you sometimes hear me coughing. And as popular as Ramirez was, there was a clear number 1 among the worldwide scouting department, and that's Juan Orona, the Barbarian. He was the top choice of Avery Shayham, Coach 1549, Blade Staff, Not My Four-Ply, and Sean Gratton, and the second choice of Kevin McDowell and Peter Hooper this time around. Definitely a lot to like about the Barbarian. Not going to be looking for a ton of money in the future. Solid outfield range with a really nice arm. The speed is fine, not the greatest bunter in the world, but the big thing about Barbarian is clearly his bat. Similar to Ramirez, he's got an outstanding contact/power type combination. A little weaker on the contact for Orona, but more home run power. Really good gap power and an above average eye as well. So definitely a lot to like about all of these players. Ramirez at $3.2 million, going to be one of the most expensive players out there, at least in terms of his asking price, although Alfredo Caicedo, a left fielder, looking for $3.6 million. The personality there really turned me off of him, and we didn't spend a lot of time with him. The batting profile is certainly very interesting, but as we've seen, there's a lot of very interesting batting profiles in this class with cleaner personalities than Caicedo. So Orona, the top pick, a little cheaper than Nelson Ramirez. Hard to imagine we're going to be able to bundle together 2 of these really blue chip prospects. I think my hope at this point is to hopefully be aggressive with an offer to one of the IAFA batters, hopefully get them signed early, and then maybe can supplement the class with a Rivera or a Garza if their demands don't get out of control. It's certainly conceivable that one or both of those guys ends up going for pretty significant money, though, given that there's really only one pitcher who's looking for big bucks in the class, and presumably there's going to be more than one of the 30 teams in baseball willing to spend decent money to bring some pitchers into their organization. And as good as I think Rivera and Galarza are, and I was very gratified to see a fair amount of support for Galarza in particular among the worldwide scouting department, because he's a guy who I really liked as well, even though in theory his ceiling is not as high as some of these players according to our scout. But I think it ultimately does come down to the top two selections of the worldwide scouting department, Orona and Ramirez. And there's not a lot of differences between these two players. Can argue that Orona is a little further along with his bat at this point, but there's a long path to full development for both of these players. Contact favors the Governor by 10. Orona, the Barbarian's gap power and home run power are both 5 higher. Eye potential is the same, and avoid strikeouts potential a little bit higher for Orona. This is really a question of whether you like vanilla or you like chocolate. I think they're both great, and I don't know that there's a definite answer. Well, actually there is in my mind. I'd prefer chocolate over vanilla, but I know everyone doesn't have that opinion. I think you have to give the Barbarian a very slight advantage when it comes to the batting ratings, but to me, it's not a deal breaker either way. Defensively, looking at these players, I think they can both be very competent defensively when all was said and done. Certainly looks like Orona could be a plus left fielder or right fielder without any additional improvements, and the hope is that certainly you would get some down the line. Infield-wise, as I talked about, would hope that you could improve Ramirez's error rating, but even right now he's looking like a competent second or third baseman, a solid first baseman, and a guy who you could play at shortstop in a pinch. In my opinion, there's not a huge difference in these players defensively, in contrast to what I did with their offensive skills. I probably lean a little bit towards Governor here. I'd say a good solid infielder, all else being equal, is probably a little harder to come across than a good solid defensive outfielder. But if you really wanted a outfielder, I can certainly see going a different way. I think the last thing to kind of think about is the speed in the bunting, and this is an era that definitely favors the Governor. Much better bunter right now. He has better running speed, and he also has better instincts on the base paths. Wouldn't view it as a deal breaker, but in a very close situation, definitely something that goes into the decision making. I'd say the last thing I really want to look at with these guys is just to remind myself of the personalities. Orona, like the low financial ambition, but it's probably not going to ultimately impact his development all that much. Ramirez don't like the low loyalty, but do really like the high leadership and work ethic, which could improve his chances of reaching his full potential. I can make a pretty strong argument to go either way with these two. In this case, I am going to go with the more expensive choice and the one who was the second choice of the worldwide scouting department, Nelson Ramirez. As I talked about, I think the bats are extremely close, although I do favor Orona. But when I look at the speed, when I look at the value of the defensive position that the player is ultimately going to be likely to play, and then when I look at the personality with the leadership and the work ethic in favor of Ramirez, he's the guy that I am going to go after as our primary target. As I mentioned, unlike last year, I'm not going to try to get tricky and try to split the $5.7 million among two big-time players. Instead, I'm going to go aggressive right out of the gate, try to get a big-time player signed early, and then perhaps pivot to one of those second-tier starting pitchers or some other cheaper player down the line. So we are going to make an offer to Mr. Ramirez of $4 million. So $800,000 more than he's looking for. He says he really likes our organization and would love to come play for us. So we are going to ask him for that $4 million response, and we will find out whether Governor Ramirez is able to join our team in the not-too-distant future. And outside of finding out if we're able to lock up Governor Ramirez and hopefully another player or two, not going to be a ton of action, I don't think, in this episode. We'll probably end up simming up to the start of spring training, which is just over a month from now. But we knew it wasn't going to be a particularly active free agent period for us. We've made some offers to some players to supplement the upper levels of our farm system. And we're going to still keep an eye on the franchise, Jake Ortega. Although at this point, he's still telling us that there's some pretty strong demand for him with a $18,600,000 offer from the Brewers, which is just something that we have no interest in matching. But if for some reason he is bluffing and he ends up lingering on the market, we'll continue to follow what's going on with Mr. Ortega as well. And a very big day here on January 18th, just a few days after we started negotiations. Ramirez yesterday told us he'd sign with us unless someone gave him a better deal. Came back today and says that what we have offered him is not enough. Looking for $5.6 million. So Governor is looking for a full pull on what he was looking for to bring him on board. Have to check in maybe on Orona and see what things look like with him. I would imagine he'd be a little bit cheaper at this point. Also, Jake Ortega apparently was not bluffing. Going to be making $17.2 million from the Brewers for this upcoming season. Our hope is maybe they'll use him defensively a little more conservatively, play him at DH more frequently, so hopefully he can play more than the 33 games that he has played each of the past 2 seasons. And looking at the pool and the number 1 pick of the worldwide scouting department, Juan Orona, still on the market and says he's only looking for $1.44 million. I can't imagine Barbarian is actually going to go for that amount. If he does, I'm going to feel silly. But ultimately, I wanted Ramirez a little more than Orona, and I'm okay trying to bring on one big gun this year. Obviously was hoping we might be able to supplement it with a pitcher. But the Governor was the guy who was ultimately on the top of my list. We're going to offer him every penny we can, which is a number that at best people can tie and nobody can beat unless they've made some trades for some IAFA money. If Orona really ends up going for $2.5 million, and we could have paired him with another big-time player, I'll feel kind of silly. But my hunch is that when all is said and done, there's going to be a pretty significant bidding war for Mr. Orona as well. And we did end up signing Governor Ramirez for the full $5.7 million that we could. Very excited to have Governor in the organization. Think he can be an outstanding player for us, but definitely we'll keep an eye on Mr. Orona. Still on the market right now. You can see outside of Ramirez with us, Castro has gone for over $5 million, Herrera $4.75 million, Gaitan, who was one of the 5-star ceiling prospects, but he was one that both we and the Worldwide Scouting Department were a little less enthusiastic, went for the full $5.7 million. Zambrano went for $3.5 million to Pittsburgh. And you can see there are still 3 teams out there with the full $5.7 million. The Reds, Twins, Nationals, Cubs, Tigers, Rays, Guardians, etc. all have over $5.2 million to spend. So my hunch is Orona is going to end up making a lot of money. Clearly, if he does end up going to someone for $1.5 million to $2.5 million, I will be second guessing myself, and the members of the Worldwide Scouting Department will be likely first guessing me. And Orona has signed a couple of days ago, went for almost $4.8 million. So as expected, there was not really a great bargain to be had with him. If we were only going to get one guy out of Orona or Ramirez, Ramirez was my choice, but clearly it was a very close call, and I can't argue with the members of the Worldwide Scouting Department who thought that Orona perhaps was the better choice than Mr. Ramirez. And as the calendar turns to February 1st, another month of updates from our scout. Kevin King, the pitcher who we just traded for this offseason, and we used Doug Weiss and several other major leaguers as well as a few key prospects to bring him on board. Already regressing from what we thought he was. Mixed results for Luis Villarreal. Fortunately, Savion Keys, David Ibarra, and the now healthy once again Ernesto Comunez all had some positive development in the month of January, along with Bobby Armstrong in general, although his defense in center field is slipping. So whether or not Armstrong is the ultimate right answer for us for the long term in center field is definitely in question. But with Darnell Selvey possibly playing his final season with us this year as our left fielder, there's definitely a path to eventually move Bobby Armstrong out of center field. Issue is, of course, we just need to find a center fielder who can field better than him and hopefully hit close to as well as he does, which certainly is not going to be easy to do. And since the drama's kind of over in this episode, the things we were going to focus on were the IAFA class, and we spent every penny we had available on Ramirez, and we were going to continue to monitor Jake Ortega and hope that maybe we'd get an opportunity to get him at a discount price down the line, which obviously didn't happen. I think we'll call it an episode here, even though we're only on February 1st. But before we do, we'll check in on the development lab. We still got about 3.5 weeks until the beginning of spring training, when we'll find out the results of these programs. Bucket Manelli continues to excel in his contact program. We also have Devin Carrick continuing to excel in improving his home run power. Federico Ariola excelling in his secondary pitch improvement. And only one person struggling now, which is an improvement from when we checked in several weeks ago. Bones Mercer continues to struggle in improving his pitch movement. You can see we do have a lot of frustrated people, more frustrated than on track. So in general, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a particularly rewarding player development lab for us this off season, but still have the better part of February for hopefully a few more people to get on track. And in a perfect world, we'd like to avoid the poor results that happen when people struggle with a program. So we'll find out how the development lab worked out next episode, and we'll also get into spring training and ultimately try to keep this team healthy as we prepare to go for a three-peat here in 2044. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.